When I think Canada, I always think, they're nice people, man. But maybe they got a dark side. Because this video is called Canadians Change When They Hear the Word War.
While Canadians are nowadays subject to the stereotype of hockey-loving, maple syrup-chugging, overly polite potheads, their wartime stereotypes in the First and Second World Wars had their enemies trembling in their boots and making a hot mess in their trousers. It's as if when the Canadians hear the word war, their insatiable desire for maple syrup and Canadian beer turns into an insatiable desire for blood. In saying that, however, they didn't always rush enemy positions with bayonets, meat cleavers, and spiked clubs, but were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war. In this video, we're going to explore Canadian wartime reputation, keeping our scope focused.
I also didn't realize this was going to be like an old war kind of video. I had no idea. But still cool.
On World War II and the heroic feats of individual Canadian soldiers therein.
Alright. The Front. Unknown facts of history. Hey. 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 Here we go. Down to the floor. Hey. Hey.
Quickly to the First World War, in which the Canadians laid the groundwork for their reputation as shock troopers. Mostly, the troops of the Canadian Corps were known for their savage raids on enemy trenches and their unwritten take no prisoner and kill the wounded policy.
Was that the action? There's no way that's true, man.
Locked in a stalemate in opposing trenches, the Canadians devised all manner of strategies and weaponry to flip the chessboard upside down and clean up the enemy pieces. Cutting through barbed wire, they crept upon them in the cover of night with painted faces, launching either savage, unforeshadowed raids or perking up their ears and eavesdropping on enemy plans. In said raids, the Canadians gorged their bayonets with blood and made good use of improvised melee weapons, paying little attention to attempts at surrender and skewering bandaged and unarmed men just the same as men on their feet with rifles. They even concocted an alchemist's shelf of homebrew explosives, like pipe bombs and jam jars loaded with nails and gunpowder. I think it's a safe bet to say that at least one grenade is made with a maple syrup jar. There are also tales of Canadian troops using temporary truces, like on Christmas Day, as a chance to catch their enemy with his stockings on, sending him grenades instead of Christmas ham, and
there is no way I'm believing that. There's no way I'm believing that. No.
Bullets through the brain instead of season's greetings.
There's no way.
Now, it could be argued that Canadians were acting out of vengeance, but couldn't that argument be used to justify most atrocities in
It's usually why wars start, is it not?
Canadian Lieutenant R.C. Germain's letter home to his parents makes the revenge excuse about as clear as the sap from a freshly tapped maple tree. After losing half of my company there, we rushed them, and they had the nerve to throw up their hands and cry "Kamerad." All the kamerad they got was a foot of cold steel, while I blew their brains out with my revolver. Despite being a little stab-happy with enemy soldiers, Canadian troops were known for being quite, as we contemporary folk have come to expect, polite to civilian populations. Before we have a look at Canadian reputation in World War II and some of its stories, it might pay to know about Canada's involvement in the war. Canada waited until the 10th of September 1939 to declare war in Germany because it didn't want to follow Britain like a Commonwealth sheep. It took Canada until the 11th of June 1940 to declare war on Italy and the 7th of December 1941 to declare it on Japan. Overall, about 10% of Canada's population fought for her and the Allies. This amounted to around 1,100,000 Canadians serving in the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Of this 1 million...
Do you know, like, this may sound silly, but I swear this is the truth. I have never heard of Canada being in the World Wars before today. I was about 35 seconds old when I learned that Canada was part of the wars. I had no idea, man.
100,000, the majority were volunteers. Canadians fought in almost every theatre of World War II, notably in the defence of the United Kingdom, the Battle of Hong Kong, the Dieppe Raid, the invasions of Sicily and Italy, the Normandy landings and the liberation of France, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. The Canadian Navy escorted Allied ships across the Atlantic and maintained a high presence in the Pacific Ocean, and pilots from the Canadian Air Force flew under the wing of the British Royal Air Force. German submarines sunk Canadian naval and merchant vessels in the water of Canada and Newfoundland and attacked the loading pier at Bell Island. And the Japanese also attacked a lighthouse on Vancouver Island, though little else occurred in Canadian waters.
They attacked a lighthouse? What is the point in attacking a lighthouse? They flew the whole way from Japan to attack a lighthouse.
Or on mainland Canada. Of the military operations in which Canadians were involved, their ferocity and inventiveness stood out in the Battle of Ortona, the Normandy landings, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. Through the medieval streets of Ortona, Italy, the Canadians and Germans engaged in brutal room-to-room, hand-to-hand fighting, with the Germans eventually having to withdraw. Here, the Canadians coined the tactic mouse holding, which is basically blowing holes in buildings to allow the passage of infantry rather than running into enemy bullets in the open.
I mean, that sounds like the smart thing to do.
The Canadians landed on Juno Beach, the second most resisted beachhead besides Omaha. The Canadians penetrated further inland than anyone else, coming up against some of the strongest units in the German military. In Belgium and the Netherlands, the Canadians spent thousands and thousands of Canadian lives to drive the Germans back and get food to the starving civilian populations. They even shared rations with civilians and gave them blankets. Some of the most intense combat here was in the Battle of Scheldt. The Allies fought through flooded terrain against stiff German defenses for about a month. This battle alone cost the Canadians more than 6,000 casualties. This latter triumph, particularly the part about getting food to the starving civilians, is certainly keeping with Canadian tendencies in the First World War.
Facts, man.
Though the following atrocity paints a bit of a different picture. Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Frederick E. Wiggle was shot dead on approach to the town of Friseute, Germany, and a rumor spread that it was a civilian sniper from that town who shot him. Back on that revenge train, the Canadians burnt down the entire town, apparently moving its citizens onward before setting their homes on fire. It was discovered later that Wiggle was shot by German soldiers. Shit. Now, the intent of emphasizing Canadian brutality in World War I and mentioning the Friseute incident is not to take away from Canadian bravery in either world conflict. Like I said before, Canadians were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war, and I think the best way to communicate that is to share some stories involving some of the most heroic Canadian soldiers in World War II.
This is real stories.
On the 14th of December 1943, Canadian Captain Paul Triquet and his company, supported by an armoured squadron, tried to cross the gully and take the Casa Berardi, a hamlet on the Orto Orsona lateral, Italy. Under heavy machine gun and mortar fire, Triquet ran around organising and inspiring what remained of his men.
Is this a real photograph from the World War? Jesus, do they got no guns?
Saying, "There are enemy in front of us, behind us, and on our flanks. There is only one safe place. That is on the objective," before charging forward and breaking through the enemy line. Triquet's company and the supporting tank squadron pushed right up to the edge of Casa Berardi, where he set up defenses and fought off a tank-supported German counterattack with whatever weapons he could find. He held the defensive parameter against superior numbers until the rest of the battalion came in and relieved the company. Triquet's utter disregard of danger, his cheerfulness and tireless devotion inspired his men, and his tactical skill and leadership facilitated the capture at a vital point on the Ortona Orsona lateral.
These are David Vivian Curry.
On the 18th of August 1944, Canadian Major David Vivian Curry was in command of a force of tanks, self-propelled anti-tank guns and infantry. His task was to block an escape route from the Falaise pocket in the village of Solembert-sur-Divert, Normandy. Curry went in alone to scout German defenses and to free the crew of 2 Allied tanks which were previously disabled. Under heavy mortar fire, he succeeded. The Germans then kept throwing counterattacks at Curry and his men until on the 20th, one final German counterattack was thwarted by Curry, costing the Germans some 2,900 casualties.
Jeez, man.
Throughout these 3 days of intense combat, Currie displayed gallant conduct and a contempt of danger, and collected and inspired his men. One of his officers said, "We knew at one stage that it was going to be a fight to the finish, but he was so cool about it, it was impossible for us to get excited." Over the 3 days, Currie barely got an hour's sleep, and when it was over, he fell asleep standing and then crashed to the ground.
That's kind of insane. I don't blame him though, man. Can you imagine trying to get a decent night's sleep in the middle of a world war? Explosions and gunshots and screaming going off around you. I don't think no one's gonna sleep well, man.
I've got to say, that last one is pure insanity.
Goddamn right.
Absolute machine. Overall, based on the available evidence at least, I think Canadians in World War II abandoned their unofficial take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies of World War I. Obviously, this is a generalization, and the Frieseuter incident certainly demonstrates that they were at least capable of unjust violence, though there is no comparing the deeds of the Canadians to, say, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Soviets. As evinced by the stories of Paul Triqueux, David Currie, and Leo Major, Canadian courage and formidability was in no short supply, and I believe modern-day Canadians should be proud of how the Canadian military cleaned up their act after World War I and made such a brave and significant contribution to an Allied victory in the Second World War.
I actually, this is, like I said at the start of the video, this is the first time I've ever heard. I didn't even know Canada was part of the World Wars, man. But I feel like that's also maybe like a spit in the face. Because why haven't I heard of that? Like, whenever I was at school, all you did was hear about the British and the Americans. That was it. Never heard of Canada being in World Wars in my life. That sucks. That sucks from the education board of my country. Do better. Fuck me. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I really like doing these type of videos, man. I ain't gonna lie, but if you want me to, react to literally anything, let me know down below. But most of all, you have yourself a good day. Peace.